Welcome to Rocketship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev, and today's guest is Samuel Newman, developer from the UK, who graduated with first-class honors from the university in 2021, and you also made your own language. So thanks for joining, first of all, Samuel.
Thanks, yeah, it's great to be here.
And whenever I hear the name Samuel Newman, I don't know, have you watched Seinfeld? Do you know the series?
No, I haven't at all.
Oh my, I'm rewatching it with my wife again, and there's like a neighbor who's called Newman, and whenever the main character hears about it, it's like, Newman! So the whole time I was like, my wife saying, I'm talking to Newman today. But anyway, we're going to not talk about all of these things. We will talk about what you currently do, because you work for Bluesky. You had, I think, quite the impact on the React Native app of Bluesky. You recently wrote a really cool article about React Native and some of the like smaller pieces about it. And you also will explain some stuff about the add protocol, which I have many, many questions about. So this is going to be really interesting. But first, did I get this right? You made your own programming language at university? How and why?
Yeah. Oh, back to my university dissertation. Yeah, it was. I was. Yeah, to do something for a dissertation. I was like, what's something that's really difficult? Make a programming language. It was really fun. I did it in Haskell.
Yeah, I looked it up. It's called Lyre. How did you pronounce it?
Something, I don't know. Yeah.
It looks like it didn't got too popular.
It's not really meant to be used. It was more of a kind of research project. It was fun though.
Absolutely. Huge respect for that. I have no idea how that works. But as I said, you currently work for Bluesky, and you joined Bluesky, I think, in March 2024. So yeah, how did all of that happen? How did you join Bluesky? Because I think you actually worked on sort of a competitor before. I don't know how to call it. Maybe you can recall the story.
Yeah, no. Okay, back to the start. So basically I got into Bluesky like back when it was kind of the invite codes. I just managed to get my hands on an invite code pretty early. I think April 23. And at the time the app was pretty janky. I mean, to use it, the web version, it was like a staging URL. So it was like really not, these were really early days. And the app was like a little bit janky, and there was some like issues where I was just like, I wish I could fix that. No one had tried building a client for it yet. I think I was one of the first to just give it a shot. And I kind of had been in the mood to learn React Native properly, something I'd done for work, but like really not much. So I was like, okay, two birds with one stone. Let's build a Bluesky client. And then that just kept on happening. I just kept on working on it, and it got closer and closer. And then I ended up releasing it on the App Store and the Play Store, which was really cool. And then at the end of 23, I interviewed with Bluesky, and I got the job on the app team. So that was really cool.
That's so cool. I think your other client, what's it called? Gray Sky, right?
Yeah.
It still exists, and people can still download it, right?
Yeah, it's still there on the App Store. It's a bit of kind of maintenance, just kind of mode. It's a bit much already working on one Bluesky client. I can't really have a capacity to work on two at the same time.
I don't know. You could also like kind of get into like a conflict of interest if you at work for Bluesky, and then in the evening you work on a competitor app.
As I just don't have the energy to even try and do that, to be honest. But I'm happy with the state that it's in. But I'm just much more interested in putting my energy into the main one.
Absolutely, yeah. I think. I don't know when I heard about Bluesky the first time. I think it was in 2024. So you said you were like early 2023. What was Bluesky back then? Was it like still sort of a research project? Because I think I never heard about it in 2023.
Yeah, so that was trying to get the timeline right. I think that was like after Elon had started buying Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just in the kind of, on my Twitter timeline, it was just kind of like the hip new thing. Everyone was trying to get the invite codes. It was like a kind of like a status thing to be cool enough to get in there. So I was like, I've got to get in on this. I didn't really know much about it. Like I didn't know anything about it at all until I joined. And then I just discovered that it was like really open and really hackable, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think during that time I signed up for Mastodon, which I think never got anywhere. I don't know. It probably has like a small community still, but Yeah, eventually I came back to X, and then just a couple of weeks ago, I think it was like during or after the election, that Blue Sky lineup skyrocketed and all the people came in. So do you know the numbers right now? How many users do you have?
So currently it's sitting at 24 million. Yeah, and that. There was a crazy period just after the election where we were getting a million new users a day, which was insane. And that went on for like a week. It was
What's it currently like?
it's calmed down a little bit, but it's still like crazy numbers, compared to where we were before. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we're growing pretty damn fast. It's really cool to see.
Absolutely. And just reading on Blue Sky and talking to people, it feels like people really wanted this platform, which feels more, I don't know, more personal again. People share stories again. It's not just like, here's my thread and here's like the 10 best things and whatever works on the current X algorithm. So people really enjoy Blue Sky from what I read. But just for people who haven't really heard about it, like, what is the general idea behind Blue Sky? Like, is it the company? Is it the app, or like the protocol? Could you like give the general overview what Blue Sky actually is?
Yeah, well, Blue Sky has many things.
That's always a problem.
It is. I mean, sorry about that. The yeah. So first and foremost, it's an app. It's a microblogging platform. If you're used to Twitter, it looks pretty similar to that. But what it also is it's built on what we call the app protocol, which is meant to be kind of just a new way of how to build apps that kind of returns, gives users like control over their own data in like a very fundamental way. And it's kind of like a new way that we think that apps like this could and maybe should be built.
So is this, we're going to get into the ad protocol at the end more again, but is this like, I mean, when people talked about Web3 and like the chains, and they said, oh, you can like write your blog posts and you own them and you can take them with you. Is the ad protocol sort of like that as well?
I mean, it's kind of like Web3 from a parallel universe where it's
From
not,
an actual helpful point of view.
it's like a parallel universe where it's just not blockchains. I mean, there's a lot of interesting cryptography that it requires to get it to work. Like data is signed so that you can verify like basically the infrastructure under the hood. So it looks like an app. It just looks like a normal app. You don't even have to think about it. You don't need to care about the app protocol if you don't want to care about it. But under the hood, all of these services like are kind of like decentralized, and like you can host your own data. Different parts of the infrastructure can be hosted by different parties. Broader goal is to kind of make it like billionaire proof. Buying Blue Sky won't buy this kind of like, if we don't own the protocol, then, if Blue Sky turns evil, then our work will remain, and that doesn't mean that's the end of it, if you know what I mean. Hopefully the protocol will outlive Blue Sky. That's the goal.
Hopefully, I mean, hopefully, Blue Sky will be around for a long time. But so we're going to come back to the history of the protocol as well, because you also have a great React Native client, and that, I mean, what caught my interest in the beginning. But before, like, how big is your dev team? Like, how many people are working on, let's say, the actual application of Blue Sky?
So, like, it's 20 engineers kind of in the whole company, and then on the app team specifically, it's like 4 to 5 people. Yeah.
And I think you were kind of like, or that's at least what people usually tell, that the whole Blue Sky app was developed by one person. Was that you, or do they refer to the Gray Sky app, or?
No. So so basically the backstory is Blue Sky was originally like a research project inside of Twitter. They elected Jay Graber to lead it, and she decided that it should be like its own company. So basically with Twitter gave her money. She started this company called Blue Sky, but it was just like a protocol research company. Then when Elon bought it, obviously he shut down all of these early side projects because he wasn't interested. But luckily, because Blue Sky was independent, they decided, we're building this protocol for Twitter to use. Instead of, if Twitter's not going to use it anymore, let's build our own app to go on top of this protocol, and we can prove it out. We can prove that the protocol works. And so Paul, who was like one of the founding engineers, he was a protocol engineer, but he was like, okay, I guess I'm building an app now. And so he built the first version of the app like pretty much by himself in like 3 months.
That's crazy. Yeah. Did he have like any knowledge about React Native upfront, or because you said he was like the protocol engineer before?
I think he had, I don't know exactly, he had like experience with React and stuff, but he wasn't like a super hardcore app developer by any means, no.
That's crazy. So you also use the full suite of tools. I think you use Expo, as far as I know. And already we can say that the whole code for Bluesky is on GitHub. That is kind of rare. Do you know like what's the reason behind this? Do you just like want the community to contribute to this, or did you just feel like, yeah, you don't own the app protocol, so you also don't have to own the app, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unprecedented, right? When we reached #1 on the App Store, we were
Yeah.
like, has an open source like social app ever done this before? I don't think so. It's really rare for sure. As for the reason, I don't know. It's kind of like if it feels good for our mission, I guess. The all of the kind of back end protocol stuff, like most of that's open source because you can run your own infrastructure. So obviously you need the code to be able to run it. And then that open sourcing the app predates me, so I can't speak to the actual reasons. But I'm really glad it is open source because I think it's really cool. We benefit hugely from it.
Do you get a lot of pull requests or stuff like where people fix your issues?
have really high quality ones. It's really shocking, and it was crazy when the basically the entire developer community moved over it in a week, and then suddenly I was drowning in really really good pull requests.
You don't have to write code anymore. You just do like reviews of PRs.
I feel like if I optimized for it, if I kind of tactically like nerd snag people in the community enough, I could probably get away with it.
Yeah, that's also a good tactic that Dan used to get people to fix stuff, right? So we know Dan Abramov, also known for a lot of his work in React, joined Bluesky. I think at least half a year ago or so.
He joined maybe 6 months before I did.
Yeah, and he a couple of months opened this quite famous post about the text input fields being so sluggish, and just in about like 1 or 2 weeks something was fixed that was previously open for like 6 years.
Yeah, no, that was my issue that I filed, and we were just so sick of it. But it's when it turns out having like a high profile open source app, like people are really keen to help because we've turned into like a pretty good showcase of all these tools.
Absolutely.
With doing cool stuff with the animated and all that stuff. People are really eager to help, which is really fun.
Right. Yeah. So let's dive into some technologies because that's quite interesting. I mean, besides the text input field being janky and not being really high quality, you wrote a post about React Native and quote unquote the native field.
Yeah.
Where you tried, I think, to describe how you went from a regular React Native app to actually something that consumer love. So I'd love to touch on a couple of points there. Maybe we can recap or quickly go through them because I've found all of them to be really, really helpful. You probably like made all these changes and then noticed that things got better, or how did you like got the idea for that post?
Yeah. I guess this was a kind of a retrospective of kind of months work, pretty much. But yeah, basically how I think of it is a lot of React Native developers, come into it from being just React like web developers, right? And if you want to get the most out of React Native, it does require like a little bit of a mindset shift. I mean, React Native is awesome because it does allow you to do that, but like there's just a bit of nuance that I think you need to know about if you want to reach the kind of really high levels of quality.
Yeah, I mean, many people who are new to React Native, when I talk to them, first of all, they're like, there are no components. Whereas like I came from Flutter and I had all these tons of components and now I have nothing. Like this is horrible. I hate React Native. And second, once you start using a bit of it, it still doesn't feel that native. I mean, it sort of is, but I completely agree to all the things you said, that there are tiny things. Like the first thing you mentioned is you have to thin out your border. So instead of using like border width 1, use style sheet hairline width. And it makes such a huge difference, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. That was I was shocked how big of a difference it made. Frankly, it just kind of takes the chunkiness out of it. But as a web developer, you don't think of it, right? Because the web only has 1 pixel borders.
I mean, you also don't you don't really pick up those skills, but like you write your app, you learn about style sheet API, and then
Yeah.
like, yeah, you naturally write a one when it says like border width. Yeah, I want to use the smallest. You don't really think about that there's something included in style sheet that's called hairline width. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's just like, how are you supposed to know? Because this is just like it's kind of, you know, it's in the docs, but why would, I don't know why, how you'd ever stumble across it. And yeah.
exactly. And you also had something about the native bottom sheet, and I was curious because in many of my videos and tutorials, I actually use the quite popular Gore Home bottom sheet.
Mhm.
And although I found it's sometimes a bit like strange to set up, it usually worked pretty well for me. But you said you ended up like replacing it with a native bottom sheet, and I, by the way, think that component looks amazing. But why did you encounter so many problems with the bottom sheet? Do you still remember?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had just a long list of bugs. I mean, part of it was our implementation. I'm sure if we put like 2 weeks of work into kind of polishing how we were using it, we could have probably fixed it. But there were just like all of these kind of strange behaviors. You know, the fact that you have to kind of use special components like special scroll views inside them and special text inputs. And then there's also we had a problem with accessibility on Android because, you know, it's not a real modal. It's like at the end of the day, it's a fake JavaScript based modal.
Honestly, I didn't know this before. I thought that was actually like a good or the best implementation, but turns out.
To be honest, I don't know the exact details, but all I do know is that Haley, my colleague, said just got completely fed up with it, sat down and rewrote it in, you know, Swift/Kotlin. And yeah, well, I guess the results speak for themselves. It's really just
Is
they feel so good. The fact that they have the proper behavior where on iOS you swipe them all the way to the top and like the backdrop kind of falls back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, but the React Native TrueSheet library is not the one that your colleague Haley made, right? Haley just made something internally, I guess?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing.
Okay.
We wrote our own one just so that we could like kind of do a more direct one-to-one replacement with our wrapper, basically. So we just swapped out the implementation of our abstraction, and then it just kind of worked pretty much.
Honestly, this whole bottom sheet, native bottom sheet, falls into the same category as like a couple of weeks ago. Oscar, I think he's called Oscar, made the React native bottom tabs library. And I noticed first time that Expo router or React navigation is actually not the native bottom tab bar behavior, but his library is. And once you use it, I was like, oh wow, it can look that good. Have you tried that library?
Yeah, no, I tried it. I did try it out. It is really cool, and
It's so smooth. Like on iOS, you see this little, like this gentle fade in of the different tab. This is
I think,
native.
yeah, and it's just like, you know, it's you think about, you know, you think about, you know, I need bottom tabs. Okay, I'll just make 5 buttons in a row. But in reality, like native apps just like have all of these like super tiny, you know, nano interactions that you just don't think about.
Yeah, I think you called them, you made something special. You called them like squishy buttons. Could you describe what they are?
Yeah. No, that's a nice component. It's all too common to have just a very static app, you know.
Yeah, the touchable opacity is my best friend usually.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's like a million touchable opacities, and I don't know, it just kind of like it lacks a bit of energy. So for like certain buttons, you know, for like a floating action button, for example, like sometimes it's just like it's really exciting to what it makes it so much more exciting if there's like just a bit of movement. Because you know, if you look at proper like native iOS apps, you know, there's like SwiftUI just comes with like a lot of like animations, like just kind of built in. It's just kind of just the natural, like you don't even think about it, but there is just like this kind of like base level of kind of smooth animations that happens in SwiftUI apps. But it just takes a little bit of effort to do the same in React Native.
So I'm curious, why do you think is that the case? I mean, we can abstract and use many things from Swift, so why are there like no good animations out of the box in React Native?
I guess the difference is that like SwiftUI is very like batteries included, right? You're kind of using all of these Apple components that they've made for you already. Whereas React Native is very batteries not included. It's the base from which you can build Android apps or iOS apps or web apps. And that means that they can't, it relies on the community to kind of build on top of this kind of base level. And I don't know, I feel like we've seen an explosion of kind of really high quality component libraries recently. And I think that's kind of like the missing piece here is just, but like these just aren't in core because that's not core's job.
Maybe there should be like just one, and I know some people work on this, like just one library that wraps the cool Swift UI stuff and brings all of that to React Native.
Yeah, and Andrew Levy, I think, has the Swift UI React Native. Pretty much just does that, and it's really cool.
I haven't tried that one yet. Is it good?
It is really good. It's like it's a little strange. It mimics Swift UI like very closely, but it is kind of shocking because you can just kind of put together an app that combine that with the kind of bottom tabs library, and it's like, oh my god, this could just be a Swift UI app.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's my wish for 2025. That like we have more like that, more libraries like that are easily usable in React Native and make creating good apps even easier.
Absolutely.
You had one last problem, which was related to full screen gesture enabled. I was curious about this, and I was trying this out actually in the Bluesky applications. Does full screen gesture enabled mean I can just swipe to go back pretty much on the whole screen? Is that what it means?
Yeah, my understanding of that has kind of changed since I wrote the article, and I think there's been a lot of improvements in the 4.0 of whatever the
native screens or
React Native screens, yeah. But basically, yeah, the React navigation, obviously it's the native navigation animations, but when you do the swipe back, it's not the native swipe back, and it just kind of feels really off.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to tell you. I was using this, like I'm going into a post on Bluesky, and then I went back, and I'm like, this just slides like the whole page back, and I know on iOS it like fades the header or something, like transitions from the previous to the new title.
Yeah, I mean, the headers is a whole different thing, actually. We've used fake headers, basically. And I think if we were using the React navigation like header component, I think that would solve that. But really, it's the animations that really get me. Just the easing curve is just completely off. I think they have fixed it.
And you also said you're using now a lot of reanimated like layout animations and all that stuff to make the screens better and more like animated in general.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got to use them strategically. After I wrote the article, we did a really strong like performance like push to kind of really get up scrolling performance on low end Android much better. And so, yeah, don't put layout animations in the critical path, but where they can make an impact, like they're just so good. They really kind of up the feel of it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And you said you're using Expo, right? Are you using like the full suite of tools? Like, do you build with EAS and like automatically submit, and do you use code push and all the things, or?
I don't actually. I mean, like, yes, not 100% sure. I don't really deal with that. Thank God. I did far too much of that for Grey Sky and don't want to do it anymore. We do use the update. We use the update protocol that we wrote our server implementation. But cool. Yeah, we really love Expo. Like we use a lot of that stuff, and it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, so many people still say, no, I don't want to use Expo for whatever XYZ. And then, I mean, your app is the best. You're a place number one in the app store, and you're a consumer, like you're business to consumer. You're not like B2B where things can maybe like they don't have to look good. Just like look at the word products in the past, but you really speak to consumers, and you've been able to go to place number one. Your app is great. It feels good. There's really no reason not to use Expo anymore at this point.
I feel just people when they think, if there's just the pre-dev clients, there was a drawback, but that's just gone now. It's just gone, and with that drawback being gone, there is just literally no reason not to use them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we said it before. The repository is public. I mean, it's a big repository at this point, but if people would look at it, especially React Native developers, Do you think there are certain areas that are like really interesting to like learn from, things that you did that you found like really interesting how you solved them in the end, or that were like really challenging? Because we got this open public code now, so people can learn from it, right?
Yeah, no, and yeah, there totally are some really interesting things in there. I feel there's some parts where we go against some of like the orthodoxy, if that makes sense. Like we don't have a like global state management library. We kind of just use React Query and context, and it's fine. You don't need them.
Interesting.
Yeah, but so yeah, people made fun of our like giant context provider tree, but really, it's fine. It's really
There's no performance drawback.
no. I mean, maybe there's gains to be made there, but it's. I feel that's kind of going against the grain, but it works. I mean, we're kind of proving it works.
Absolutely, you do, yeah. And so, I mean, you joined in March, so you haven't been there the whole time of Bluesky. But from your point of view, what have been like the biggest issues with React Native in general? I mean, in your article, you touched on all these like small native pieces, but are there like in general critical areas when you build really consumer applications that are really important for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I feel like the React Native web is it's it's a bit strange. We have just a really big bundle size, which sucks. And so I feel like that, our web app is like, it kind of becomes like a bit like it just kind of has to kind of be a little bit compromised, which is a shame.
That's interesting because I mean, many companies use Expo in sort of like the mono repository with Next.js for the web. I guess Paul used React Native and then used it for the web, not because he's lazy, but I mean, you are a small company and probably just wanted to get something out. So I'm curious, like, what's your plan for the next time? Do you think you can overcome the issues with React Native Web and like make it better, or do you also consider just going for a Next.js implementation for the web and like a really snappy page?
This is a good question. I mean, we've got options. I feel part of the problem is just like it's a really chunky SPA. So switching to Expo router would solve that. There's also what's called React Strict DOM, which is kind of like coming at React Native for the web from a different angle, right? It's making the native side more webby rather than doing this, let's be real, incredibly silly path where you start in React, you go to the native, and then you come back to web and you're like, what are you doing? What is...
It doesn't make sense, yeah.
So, and yeah, React Strict DOM seems really cool. Need to look into that at some point.
But you don't have a clear picture for, or a clear plan for what you want to do about it?
No, I mean, no, we don't have a long-term strategy.
Do you have like usage percentage, like how many people use the app versus web?
It depends on the country, interestingly, but like the split is surprisingly just fairly even, I think, overall.
I would have thought more people use a phone in an app.
Yeah, we've got a lot of web users, I think.
That's interesting. Maybe that's in like older people. I would feel like young people they don't really use so much MacBooks and computers anymore. They're more like phone users. So maybe there are less young people. Then maybe they're all on TikTok. I don't know.
Yeah, I presume just the youths are all on TikTok. So we have all that kind of, yeah. I've seen Bluesky described as like a millennial retirement home.
Yeah, it's so funny when I also see like on Instagram some memes about like my age group, and then if you do this and then I'm like, oh yeah, it's like you're now training for high rocks or you're running a marathon or something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly my age group. It surprisingly fits very well.
Yeah.
Okay, so so React Native Web was or still is your biggest issue, and besides that, probably all the small little native things about the application that turns it from a pure React Native app to one that feels actually native.
Yeah, I don't know. So basically, a number of months ago, Dan wrote this giant list of everything that has ever annoyed him about the app. And as of like recently, I think we're at the bottom of the list. He just fixed the like the draw swipe open gesture. I don't know if you've noticed. Incredibly janky. It just doesn't work half the time.
It's also not. Is that the native iOS behavior? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just the React navigation drawer, which I think is reanimated. Anyway, he managed to fix that. So yeah, we need to draw up a new list of what bothers.
Can I post GIFs at this point? My own?
So you can post them via the web. That's my compromise.
Why is that not possible? Why is that so hard to implement?
They need to be posted like as videos, basically, and just the way that we did the image picker, they come through as images rather than videos, so that they get kind of put in the wrong tube, basically.
It would be cool if that is on my list, very high at the top.
Sure thing. Yeah, no, I need to just set aside some time to do that. The fact that they appear as videos is also really strange. So yeah.
And I also had a recommendation that would make your app maybe feel even more native.
What is it?
Yeah, just you know, when you like force touch on an app icon, some people have this menu, like you can do some things really quickly from your home screen, you know, like when you just force touch here, and you have just the default like remove app required.
Yeah.
You should do something like quick post or so. Like I do a force touch and then I can quick post.
Yeah, sure. I think you can then bind those to like the action button on the iOS 15, so you can just have like a dedicated posting button.
Yeah, if you have nothing to do during the holiday season.
Yeah, I mean, I did that for Grey Sky. I think.
Oh, really?
Evan Bacon has a library to do that. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, totally can do that.
That was so cool. Okay, so let's go a bit deeper into the layer below Bluesky. So the ad protocol. I've read many times about it, and I think the best representation of it is honestly, I watched a video from Theo a couple of weeks ago. And Theo had his browser open with like ad / and then like his domain or something. And he could see like his content that he posted basically. And that first time gave me a visual idea of what the ad protocol is. So it is kind of like you are creating a Git repository for me with all my content. Isn't that how I can think about it?
Yeah, so there's just a website like called App Proto Browser, and basically you can think about all of your data being in this repository, kind of like a Git repository. And yeah, within it there are just different data types. There's just like some structured data in there, and then everyone on the network has one of these repositories. And then what the rest of the network does is it aggregates all of this data. Could be anywhere on the web. So then we aggregate all of it back down into a more traditional app, and then present it as a microblogging client. So, but really, it's like this kind of like a distributed, like key value store that you can host yourself.
And did Bluesky sort of invent or discover the ad proto, or was that already before Bluesky?
It's certainly Bluesky's invention, but it's basically. But what's interesting about it is it's basically how really high throughput, super massive scale systems work internally at companies like Facebook or Twitter. I think it's basically the event log kind of architecture, but split up and decentralized.
Like, who is hosting these like repositories? So I'm just browsing my own content and the stuff I posted. By the way, thank you for @proto -browser. That was exactly what I was looking for. Like for weeks, I was looking, where did Theo find his content? And now I found it. But like, who's hosting the like? Yeah, I mean, it's decentralized, but
yeah. So basically, there's different parts to the system. So it's different so to explain how Mastodon works, it's like everyone has their own little Twitter, and then they kind of talk to each other, right? Like you have your own instance, and it basically just emails other instances with messages. This is just fundamentally different. This is your data layer is split out from the rest of everything else, and so you can host your own data. It's really cheap. I have mine on like a $5 VPS, but also Bluesky provides it for free because it's so cheap. It's literally just a SQLite database and a WebSocket. So yeah, Bluesky provides hosting for that for free, but also you can host it yourself. And then the other parts of the network, Bluesky currently hosts, but there's no reason why Bluesky should be the only host because anyone can stand one of these up.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just diving into this, and I can see my profile, and then I go to self, and I see my avatar, and like my ID, and my description, and probably at some point I would find my post somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, so if you go back out
Oh, the
into a
feed
different,
post records. Oh yeah, these are all my posts. It is so cool to I usually get overly excited about things, but this is so cool because this feels like I could build some sort of application and it's using my own data. I feel like I own this, although like Bluesky has this.
yeah, well, you can migrate it out.
Is it easy?
It could be easier, but there's no reason it should. Yeah, it's like a command line tool, but yeah, it is pretty easy.
Yeah, but it's so cool to just like see the content and the time and all the images, the funny images, because many people left Twitter recently, and I think Dan also like wiped out his entire timeline. So I think there's no good way to export your stuff, right?
Well,
From
you can
X.
export it, but it's dead data, right? It's this just JSON file that's a list of posts, but what are you going to do with it? It's a JSON file. This is fundamentally different because when you export this data, because it's cryptographically signed, if you just put it on another server and point your identifier towards that server, it's alive again. So you can just migrate super seamlessly.
So at proto.com, it feels like a modern thing. Like there's an SDK and everything.
Yeah.
What can I do if I like do the quick start here or go through the guides on at Proto?
Yeah. So, well, there's kind of two different parts to it, right? So there's like developing on the Bluesky APIs, which is like kind of what I did with Graysky, and then there's building on App Protocol. App Protocol can be used to build like any kind of apps. So if you go through the quick start, it makes this project called Statosphere, where you kind of just post emojis. I think it is. So really, the sky is the limit on that. However, but if you want to do stuff with Bluesky specific data, all of our data is completely open. You have free, open access to the fire hose of every single post ever.
Yeah, that is wild. It looks like the Matrix scrolling through.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's kind of it's locked open. You can't really turn it off. I feel like the a big sell for like developers who might be thinking about building on the app protocol is like it's locked open and we can't really take it away from you. If you remember when Reddit shut down their APIs and there were all of these like third-party developers kind of left out in the cold. Well, they were just kind of screwed, right? Because they could build their own Reddit front end, but they couldn't build a Reddit backend, right? Because Reddit owns all the data and they're not going to give it to you. This kind of flips that by not only can you build your own Bluesky front end, you can build your own Bluesky backend, which is crazy.
Yeah, indeed. Is there like you have any like wild ideas what else I could build with the at Proto if I like want to make my own startup or something? What could it be used for? Is there like any
I mean, it's kind of built for like social apps, like post public broadcast apps. So Instagram, for example, Reddit. I don't know. It's really the sky's the limit.
I don't know if you can like make a network of you like sell houses or something. I don't know some open data.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, why should I do that instead of like the regular way? That was also the question always about Web3. Like, why should I put my stuff into the blockchain instead of doing it in the traditional way?
I actually have a good answer for this. And if you recall Threads basically, I don't want to say like cheated, but like they bootstrapped off of Instagram's social graph, basically, right? They got a billion, like not a billion users, but was it like 200 million users in a day or something like that? And that's because they were able to bootstrap Instagram social graph. Because Blue Sky's social graph is open, if someone builds something on the app protocol, they can they can bootstrap off of our social graph, right? If you built Instagram on the app protocol, when the existing Bluesky user like logs onto it, like they would be able to already have like these like pre-existing connections to their friends. You could start out with a timeline that already knows kind of what you're interested in. You can find your friends super easily, and that means that you're just the kind of high-minded idea is that like you never have to, once you start owning your own data, you never have to kind of lose everything the next time you jump to a new social network.
I really like that idea. Like, especially as a creator, and like I've put out so much content over the years. This is definitely something I thought about before, and That's also why I got so excited about like seeing my data here, because it feels like I own it. So
And you really, genuinely, you can own and export it out.
yeah, I mean, the only not downside, but the only problem is that like my wife probably wouldn't care about if she owns the data, and
Yeah.
like her friends, and they just want like a good network.
Yeah, and well, that's the other good thing is because it's seamless, you don't have to care if you don't want to, right? Something like Mastodon you kind of have to care because it impacts the experience quite directly, you know. By making it seamless, we're kind of hoping that you can care if you want to, but if you don't care, you don't have to.
Yeah. And so the ed protocol, is this sort of like finished, or is there like still ongoing work to improve something about it going on in the background?
Yeah, I think it's like in a pretty somewhat stable state. But there are some like holes, for example, like private data. We don't really have a good story for that. You know, you'll see people asking on the app for like circles, Twitter circles, and private accounts and locked accounts and stuff, and just like we can't really do that at the moment. So like, yeah, that would be something that we have to look for in the future. Another thing is like E2E encrypted direct messages.
Oh, yes, yeah. I heard Dan talk about you made like a little fix just so you could implement the direct messages. Or...
Yeah, it's basically it's the messages are like off protocol, right? They're just like centralized. It's just a server that has your messages on it. So it's not like true end-to-end encrypted signal style. I mean, but we would kind of like to do that if we can ever find the time.
So if I wanted to get my data out of the ed protocol, so like from what I've seen here in the browser, are there also good APIs, or is there like an SDK which I can point to @/galaxies.dev and it would just like retrieve me the data?
So yeah, so you need to host your PDS, your personal data server. You need to host that somewhere else. You can just put it on like a VPS or something. You can put it on a Raspberry Pi. People have done that. And so yeah, once you get that set up, I think there are tools out there that let you migrate pretty easily off the top of my head, but I can find them for you.
But from what I heard, you can also use the Bluesky API to get that data, and that is a bit more aggregated, or a bit like you would probably return JSON data then as the Bluesky API.
Yeah, so kind of we've got kind of two sets of APIs, right? You can make requests directly to these PDSs and they will just give you the raw records. But the thing is, like, your PDS doesn't know how many likes your post got because those likes are on other people's PDSs, right?
Right.
You can only know that if someone has looked at all the PDSs, added up all the likes, and attributed it to your post. And so this view of the network is provided by what we call an app view. And so that's basically the Bluesky server. So if you want data that's kind of like been put into context with much more friendly APIs, then you would hit the Bluesky API.
And if I would draw my data out of the Bluesky hosting and have my own PDS, how does Bluesky then know about my data and my profile?
Basically, you basically just the app view. App view basically works like a kind of like a web search, like a search engine kind of like scraping thing. Like it just looks on the entire web and scrapes up all the data. The difference is that like it's data that's designed to be scraped, if that makes sense. Like the PDSs offer like a WebSocket that sends changes.
It's super interesting to get into all of this, and I'll definitely, if I got time, I want to play more with this.
Yeah, for sure.
So to wrap it up, what are the next steps? Like, what are you working on next with Bluesky? What are your biggest plans for like 2025? Are you going to like make the app even better? Is that your main focus, or growing the network? What are like the biggest things for you?
That's a good question. Both, I guess. I always want to make the app better.
Is that your main focus right now, like for you personal?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this year has been clearing up the low-hanging fruit, but there's still a lot left to do. And I think we can carry on pushing it further and further on like the quality feel. Like I don't feel like we're 100% of the way there, but it feels so much better than where it was, I guess. And then just kind of like priorities for like Bluesky more broadly. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's not your main concern, I guess.
Yeah, it's just kind of like we're moving so fast that really it's really kind of, I can't just say, oh, we're going to be working on something in March and then something else in July, because, in a month, like, I'm sure something will happen and it just flips everything on its head. So, yeah, I don't know. But
I mean, it's exciting.
yeah, I mean, it's a really fun environment to be in for sure. And so, yeah, no complaints. But it's growing the network is kind of like the kind of broad priority, I guess. Yeah.
I definitely try to help. I'm active on Bluesky as well. I recommend it to everyone listening because it's really a fun experience, and you have direct messages, although we don't have GIFs yet.
Working on it.
My last question, because I was just on the web version, came up. I could probably look into the GitHub repository, but did you use any kind of styling library? Are you using Native Wind or something like that?
We use like a homegrown comic styling library, which is just like the style sheet API that we've kind of just made a bunch of single function atomic styles that are based on Tailwind. It's a bit ugly, but it works.
I mean, the good thing about all these things is it means there's still a lot of work to be done for you.
Yeah, I feel we should just be using Native Wind, to be honest. But I think when we were redoing the styles, it was not ready for us yet. But I think it's good.
It is, yeah. The latest version should be fairly stable at this point. So yeah. Probably that, or Unistyles is the other library that many people like in React Native, which is super fast as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. ALF, that's what we call it. Styling system it's pretty goofy, but it works. I gotta say, it does work.
I mean, it brought you to first place in the App Store. Brought you to over 20 million users. So yeah, that's a good reminder for people to not over-optimize things when you get started.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Samuel, thank you so much for taking the time for explaining a couple of things about the Bluesky app and also the ad protocol. To wrap it up, where can people find out more about you or the work you do? What should they check out?
Find me on Bluesky, I guess. Just search for Samuel. I think I'm the biggest Samuel on that, so...
That's the spirit. We only say search for me on Bluesky now anymore. We're not on X anymore. Thank you, Samuel. And maybe we can talk again in late 2025 when Bluesky hit 100 million users. With the current timeline, could you estimate when would you hit 100 million with the current growth?
I mean, who knows?
Summer
we'll see
next
where
year.
We're at this time next year.
We'll do our best to grow it.
Yeah. But yeah, cool.
Thanks for taking.
Great to chat with you.
Thanks. Catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.